He entered the gym with his head down, carrying much more than weight on his body. He carried humiliations, bets against him, and the fear of failing again. But no one expected that this man, ignored and ridiculed on the first day, would become a symbol of overcoming, and it all started with a silent gesture and a workout that became transformation. Watch until the end and discover how he silenced everyone who doubted. Like real stories of overcoming obstacles? Subscribe and join us. The sun was already rising over the mountains surrounding Pineville when Tyler Mitchell woke up. His eyes opened to the same peeling ceiling as always, but today there was something different in the air, a promise, a decision he had postponed for years. Today would be the day he finally faced his fears. He dragged himself to the bathroom, avoiding as always the full-length mirror that his mother, Mrs. Evelyn, had installed years ago. "So you can see yourself better, my son," she would say with that brutal sincerity that only Southern mothers can have. Tyler was 32 years old, worked as a graphic designer at a small studio in the historic downtown, and carried 295 pounds on his body that barely reached 5'9". "Tyler, breakfast is on the table." Mrs. Evelyn's voice echoed through the hallway of the small two-story house. He took a deep breath, put on an extra-large black t-shirt, his daily armor against society's stares, and went down the stairs. Each step produced a slight groan from the old wood, as if the house also felt the weight he carried. "Good morning, Mom." Tyler tried to smile as he sat at the table. Mrs. Evelyn, a 65-year-old woman with grey hair pulled back in a perfect bun, placed a cup of black coffee and some fruit in front of him. "I dreamed about your father last night," she said while serving herself coffee. "He always said you had the potential to be someone great in life." Tyler swallowed hard. His father, Samuel, had passed away when he was only 15, victim of a massive heart attack. It was during that time that the weight began to accumulate, as if each pound were a layer of protection against the pain. "I'm starting at the gym today, Mom." The words came out almost as a whisper. Mrs. Evelyn stopped the cup halfway to her mouth. Her eyes widened for a second before returning to their usual skeptical expression. "Like that time you started running in the park and gave up in the second week, or when you bought that stationary bike that turned into a clothes rack?" Tyler swallowed the rest of his coffee, ignoring the pang of hurt. His mother wasn't cruel, she was just too realistic to believe in sudden changes. "This time it's different," he replied, getting up from the table. On his way to work, Tyler felt the familiar discomfort of sweat running down his back as he climbed the hill that led to the historic downtown. Pineville, with its steep streets and cobblestone pavements, wasn't friendly to someone of his physical size. With each step, he felt stairs that seemed to weigh tons. At the design studio, he was greeted by Charlotte, his colleague who coordinated social projects. With her curly hair and easy smile, she was one of the few people who genuinely seemed not to care about his appearance. "Morning, Ty. I need your magic for the New Horizons NGO project. They want something modern, but that doesn't lose the community." "Essence," she said, leaning on the divider of his workstation. "I can have something by the end of the day," he replied, turning on his computer and trying to ignore how the office chair seemed smaller each day. The day passed in a blur of deadlines and designs. At 5 p.m., when everyone started packing up their things, Tyler felt his stomach sink. The gym was just 2 blocks away. There was no more putting it off. "Everything okay, Tyler? You look like you've seen a ghost," asked Ryan, the studio owner, a 40-year-old who had the physique of someone who never missed a day of surfing. "Just tired. I'm starting at the gym today," Tyler replied, surprised at himself for sharing this. Ryan raised his eyebrows. "Really? Are you sure you don't want to start with something lighter, like, I don't know, yoga or water aerobics?" Tyler felt his face burn. "No, Ryan. I want the gym." Ryan's condescending smile was the last straw. Tyler grabbed his backpack and left, determined to prove something, if not to others, at least to himself. New Body Gym occupied the ground floor of a modern commercial building, contrasting with the colonial architecture that dominated downtown Pineville. With a facade entirely of tinted glass, it allowed passers-by to see the sculpted bodies exercising on the treadmills and gleaming equipment. Tyler stopped in front of the automatic door, his distorted reflection in the dark glass. For a moment, he considered turning around, going back to the comfort of his home, where no one would judge him for another day of inertia. But then he remembered his father's words, "A man is measured not by the size of his body, but by the strength of his determination." With a deep sigh, he took a step forward. The doors opened, inviting him to enter a world that until then he had only observed from afar, a world of mirrors, sweat, and he hoped, transformation. What Tyler didn't know was that this simple step would change not just his body, but the entire trajectory of his life, and that in that space of steel and muscles between contempt and overcoming, he would find not only a new version of himself, but also an unexpected and deep love. The reception of New Body Gym was as intimidating as Tyler had imagined. White lights reflected on the black porcelain floor, while electronic music pulsed through the speakers. Behind the counter, a young woman with platinum blonde hair and a sculpted body stared at him with a commercial smile. "Good evening, can I help you?" she asked, her eyes quickly scanning Tyler's figure. "I want to sign up," he replied, trying to sound confident. The receptionist, whose name tag identified her as Patricia, raised her eyebrows for a second before recovering her professional composure. "Of course. We have several plans. Do you have any experience with weight training?" Tyler swallowed hard. "No, it's my first time." Patricia typed quickly on the computer. "I'll enroll you in the basic plan and schedule a physical assessment with one of our personal trainers. Garrett is free now. He can guide you." Before Tyler could answer, she was already speaking on the internal phone. Minutes later, a tall, muscular man, approximately 35 years old, appeared at the reception. He wore a black t-shirt with the gym logo and athletic pants. His gaze evaluated Tyler from head to toe without disguising it. "So you're the newbie?" Garrett extended his hand, his grip too firm, as if testing Tyler's resistance. "Let's do your assessment." The assessment room was small and claustrophobic, dominated by a digital scale and a large mirror. Tyler avoided looking at his reflection as Garrett noted his data. 295 pounds. Garrett murmured, typing on his tablet. "Let's measure your body fat percentage." The cold hands of the measuring tape circling his body were like snakes sliding over his skin. Each number noted seemed a confirmation of what Tyler already knew. He was well above the ideal weight. "Well, I'll be honest with you," Garrett said after completing the measurements. "You have a long road ahead. We'll start very light, more cardio than weight training. I need to know if you're committed before creating a more advanced workout." "I am committed," Tyler responded, more to himself than to Garrett. The personal trainer let out a brief laugh. "Everyone says that on the first day." The main gym hall was a labyrinth of machines and mirrors. Dozens of people were exercising, all seeming to know exactly what they were doing. Tyler felt like an alien invading an unknown planet. Garrett positioned him in front of a treadmill. 20 minutes of light walking to start. Then we'll do some basic exercises. Walking on the treadmill, Tyler felt exposed. The entire wall in front of him was mirrored, forcing him to face the image he so avoided. Behind him he could feel stares and whispers. In a gym frequented mainly by attractive young people from Pineville, he was an anomaly. "Look at the size of him," a female voice whispered behind him, loud enough for him to hear. "I bet he doesn't last a week." The comment was followed by giggles. Tyler focused on breathing, ignoring the heat rising to his face. 5 minutes on the treadmill and he was already panting, sweat flowing abundantly. Near the treadmills, a group of young men were lifting weights while chatting animatedly. Among them was Matthew Allen, son of one of the most influential businessmen in town. With his sculpted body and perfect smile, he was the embodiment of everything Tyler was not. Matthew looked in Tyler's direction and said something that made the whole group laugh. The shame burned even stronger, but Tyler continued walking. Just 15 more minutes, he thought. After the treadmill, Garrett took him to the weights area. "Let's start with something very light," he said, handing Tyler a pair of 3-pound dumbbells. 15 repetitions of lateral raises. Tyler lifted the weights according to the demonstration, feeling the muscles in his arms protest. On the third movement, his sweaty hands failed. One of the dumbbells escaped, falling to the floor with a metallic thud that seemed to echo throughout the gym. The momentary silence was followed by poorly disguised laughter. Tyler's face burned with shame as he bent down to pick up the dumbbell. As he stood up, he met Garrett's gaze, a mixture of impatience and disbelief. "Hold them more firmly," the personal trainer instructed, without hiding the condescending tone. The rest of the workout was torture. Each exercise exposed more and more of Tyler's limitations. His legs trembled during squats, his arms gave way during adapted push-ups. His breathing became irregular after minimal efforts. When he finally finished, Tyler was drenched in sweat and exhausted. Garrett handed him a workout card. "Monday, Wednesday and Friday, same time," he said mechanically. "If you really want results, nutrition is as important as the workout. Cut sodas, sugar, and carbs at night." Tyler nodded, tucking the card into his backpack. "Thank you, I'll be here on Wednesday." Garrett gave a skeptical half-smile. "We'll see." On the way to the locker room, Tyler tried to ignore the stares. Inside, the shower cubicle, he allowed himself a moment of weakness. The hot water mixed with the silent tears of frustration. Part of him wanted to give up, never come back. It would be easier to accept that some people just weren't made to change. As he left the shower, while carefully drying himself so as not to wet his clean clothes, he heard voices on the other side of the cubicle door. "Did you see the new fat guy?" Matthew's voice was unmistakable. "Garrett bet dinner that he won't come back on Wednesday." "I give him a week at most," answered another male voice. "There's always one of those who shows up motivated and disappears soon after." Tyler remained motionless, holding his breath until the voices moved away. He dressed slowly, the weight of humiliation much harder to carry than the extra pounds. As he left the locker room, the main hall was already less crowded. As he headed for the exit, he noticed a solitary figure in the functional training area. A woman with brown hair tied in a high ponytail was executing a series of movements with impressive precision. Unlike the other gym-goers, she didn't seem to be exercising to show off her body or impress anyone. There was something genuine in her effort, an almost meditative concentration. For a brief moment their eyes met through the mirror. She didn't look away, didn't show disgust or pity. She just nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement of another soul present in the same space. That simple gesture, so small it almost went unnoticed, planted a seed of something Tyler hadn't felt in a long time: dignity. On the street, night had already fallen over Pineville. The cool mountain air caressed his face, still warm from the physical effort. There was a long way to his house, but Tyler decided to walk, each step a small affirmation that he was still in control of his journey. That night, lying in his bed, while his entire body ached in protest, he made a decision. He would return on Wednesday and on Friday, and the following week. Not for Garrett, nor for his mother, nor to prove something to Matthew or the others who laughed. He would return for himself, for the man he knew he could become. What Tyler didn't imagine was that the woman from the gym, the only one who looked at him as an equal, would become a fundamental pillar in his transformation. And that soon their paths would cross in ways that would change them both forever. The clock struck 6 p.m. when Tyler pushed open the gym door on Wednesday. There was a bet against him, and he knew it. He could feel it in the surprised expressions that greeted him. Patricia's raised eyebrow at reception, Garrett's astonished look as he talked with a client near the entrance. "You came back." It wasn't a question, but an incredulous statement from the personal trainer. "I said I would," Tyler replied, walking toward the locker room without waiting for a response. In the weeks that followed, Tyler established a routine. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, punctually at 6 p.m., he entered New Body Gym. The looks of surprise were gradually replaced by indifference, then by a silent curiosity. He still didn't belong in that world, but he was no longer a complete stranger. At the end of the first month, Garrett called him for a reassessment. "Down 4 pounds, the personal announced, with a slight tone of approval. "It's not much, but it's a start." For Tyler, those 4 pounds were more than numbers on a scale. They were material proof that change was possible. Small, slow, painful, but possible. Let's intensify your workout, Garrett said, noting something on his tablet. You're ready for the next phase. The next phase meant more weight, more repetitions, more pain, but it also meant that someone finally believed he could do more. Even if that someone was just a personal trainer who initially doubted him. It was on Friday of that week, during a particularly difficult bench press series, that Tyler saw her again, the brown-haired woman he had noticed on the first day. She was helping an elderly lady adjust a machine, patiently explaining the correct movement. "Who is she?" Tyler asked Garrett while catching his breath between sets. Garrett followed his gaze. "Julia Roberts, physical therapist, works at the GI State Hospital but comes here 3 times a week to train. She also helps some of the older members voluntarily." There was genuine respect in Garrett's voice when speaking of her, something rare to hear in that environment of constant competition. In the days that followed, Tyler found himself discreetly observing Julia. Unlike most, she wasn't there to show off her body or take photos for social media. Each of her movements was precise, focused, almost technical, as if her workout were an extension of her work as a physical therapist. 2 weeks later, the inevitable happened. During a rowing exercise, Tyler felt a sharp pain in his lower back. The pain was so sudden and intense that he released the bar, which fell noisily. What happened? Garrett approached, more concerned with the equipment than with his student. "My back," Tyler replied through clenched teeth, trying to straighten up without success. "It's probably just a muscle spasm. Rest a bit and continue." But when Tyler tried to stand up, the pain intensified, drawing an involuntary groan from him. It was at that moment that Julia appeared by his side. "Don't force it." Her voice was calm but firm. "Where exactly does it hurt?" Tyler indicated the lower back, surprised by the intervention. "You probably pushed too hard or did the movement incorrectly." She looked at Garrett with a slightly accusatory expression. "He needs to rest today and apply ice. If the pain persists, seek a physical therapist." Garrett seemed disconcerted by the interference. "I was going to suggest the same." "Of course you were," Julia replied, not hiding the sarcasm. Then turning to Tyler, "Can you get up?" With her help, Tyler managed to stand. The contact with Julia's firm and secure hands sent a wave of warmth through his body that had nothing to do with physical exertion. "Thank you," he murmured, embarrassed. "Don't push yourself today. Apply ice for 20 minutes with 1-hour intervals. And tomorrow, if you're still feeling pain, find me at the hospital. I work in the physical therapy department." Before Tyler could respond adequately, she had already moved away, returning to her own workout. But something had changed. Someone had noticed him as a person, not just as the new fat guy at the gym. At home, Mrs. Evelyn prepared an ice pack with the efficiency of someone who had taken care of many pains throughout life. "I knew this would happen," she grumbled, while helping Tyler lie down on the couch. "These gyms just want your money. They don't care if you get hurt." "It wasn't the gym's fault, Mum. It was mine. I think I wanted to advance too quickly." Mrs. Evelyn sighed, sitting in the armchair beside him. "You know, your father was like that too, stubborn. When he decided something, he went all the way, no matter the cost." It was rare for his mother to talk about Samuel. The pain of the loss was still present, even after so many years. I'm proud of you, son," she said suddenly, surprising Tyler. "Not for the weight you're losing, but for the persistence. I thought you would give up in the first week." The sincerity in Mrs. Evelyn's words touched Tyler deeply. It was the first time in a long time that she had shown pride in something he was doing. The following Monday, Tyler returned to the gym. The pain in his back had decreased but not completely disappeared. To his surprise, Julia approached him as soon as she saw him enter. "How's your back?" she asked, without beating around the bush. "Better, but it still hurts a bit." "You didn't come to the hospital." It wasn't a question, but Tyler felt the need to explain himself. "I thought I'd be fine with the ice." Julia shook her head, gently disapproving. "Come with me. I have 15 minutes before my workout." She took him to a small room at the back of the gym, used for stretching and assessments. With precise gestures, she asked him to lie on the table. "I'll do a quick evaluation. If it's something simple, I can help you right here. If it's more serious, you'll need proper treatment." Her hands ran across Tyler's back with professional firmness, identifying tension points. Each touch sent shivers down his spine, a mixture of pain, relief, and something else he couldn't name. "It's a muscle contraction, as I thought. Nothing serious, but it needs to be treated correctly so it doesn't become chronic," Julia explained, while applying light pressure on a specific point. "Breathe deeply and relax." After a few minutes of manipulation, the pain had decreased considerably. Tyler sat up on the table, genuinely impressed. "Thank you, seriously, that helped a lot." Julia smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen directed at him in that environment. "Just be careful with your posture during exercises, and if you feel pain again, stop immediately." She hesitated for a moment before adding, "I'm impressed with your dedication. It's not easy to start an exercise routine, especially when the circumstances aren't the most welcoming." Tyler understood what she didn't say. When you're fat, when people bet against you, when each look seems like a judgment. "Thank you for noticing," he replied, sincere. In the days that followed, something changed in the dynamics of the gym. Tyler and Julia began to greet each other regularly. Sometimes she discreetly corrected some movement he was doing incorrectly. Other times they simply exchanged smiles through the omnipresent mirrors. It was a silent connection, almost imperceptible to the other gym-goers, but significant for both. For Tyler, it was the first time someone in that environment treated him as an equal. For Julia, it was something she herself had not yet fully defined. At the end of the second month, Tyler had lost 15 pounds. It wasn't a drastic transformation, but his movements were already more secure, his breathing less labored, his posture more confident. "If you continue like this, in a few months you'll be unrecognizable," Garrett commented during an assessment, with a tone that mixed surprise and reluctant respect. That night, as he left the gym, Tyler found Julia in the parking lot, struggling with a flat tire on her small red pickup truck. "Need help?" he asked, approaching hesitantly. Julia looked up, a mix of frustration and relief in her eyes. "If you know how to change a tire, you'd be an angel." "I do," Tyler replied, already rolling up his sleeves. As he worked on the tire, he felt Julia's eyes watching him. It wasn't the look of pity or scorn he was used to receiving. It was something different, something that made his heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with physical exertion. "You're full of surprises, Tyler Mitchell," she said when he finished the work. "How do you know my last name?" Julia smiled, a smile that lit up the night around them. "I asked," she admitted simply. "I wanted to know who the guy was who proved Garrett and Matthew wrong." The confession caught Tyler by surprise. The thought that Julia had been interested in knowing more about him was as unexpected as it was pleasant. "Thank you for the help," she said, getting into the car. "Can I offer you a ride? It's the least I can do." Tyler hesitated for only a second before accepting. As the small vehicle wound its way through the cobblestone streets of Pineville, something new was born between them, something as fragile and promising as the first muscles that were beginning to define themselves under Tyler's skin. What neither of them knew was that this ride would be just the beginning of a journey that would take them far beyond the mirrored walls of New Body Gym. A journey of transformation, overcoming, and eventually, love. Spring arrived in Pineville, bringing with it an explosion of colors. Yellow and purple magnolias dotted the city, contrasting with the intense blue sky of the mountains. To Tyler, it seemed that nature was celebrating his own transformations. 4 months had passed since his first day at the gym. Now, the scale marked 250 pounds, 45 less than when he began his journey. His clothes, once tight, now seemed borrowed from an older brother. His face, once round, was beginning to reveal lines and angles that even he didn't recognize. But the biggest change wasn't in the mirror. It was in the way people treated him. Garrett, the personal trainer who previously barely hid his skepticism, now used him as an example for new students. "If Tyler could do it, you can too," he would say to newcomers, proudly pointing to his success project. It was a questionable, form of motivation, but Tyler silently accepted the role of inspiration. He knew that, in some way, he was helping other people who entered that intimidating world for the first time. At the gym, his routine now included moments with Julia. What began with cordial greetings evolved into conversations during exercise, breaks, and eventually to an occasional coffee after the workout. It was during one of these coffees that Tyler began to know the real Julia Roberts. "Why physical therapy?" Tyler asked, as he absent-mindedly stirred his sugar-free coffee, one of the many changes in his eating habits. Julia hesitated, as if deciding how much of herself to reveal. "My younger brother Lucas was born with cerebral palsy," she finally answered, her eyes fixed on the cup in front of her. "I grew up seeing how much physical therapists changed his life, allowing him to have more independence, less pain." Tyler observed how her eyes lit up when talking about her brother. "Where is he now?" "In Austin, living alone. He graduated in computer science and works remotely for a technology company." The pride in her voice was palpable. "He always says I chose to fix bodies while he prefers to fix codes. You must be very close." "We are, especially after our parents passed away." She paused, taking a sip of her herbal tea. "And you? Have you always lived in Pineville?" "I was born here, never left actually. I've been taking care of my mother since my father passed away." "He had heart problems," Tyler replied, surprised by his own ease in sharing this. "And your work as a designer, how did that start?" "I always liked to draw. It was a form of escape when the kids at school teased me because of my weight." He smiled, remembering. "Later? In college, I discovered I could turn it into a profession." Julia studied him for a moment, her expressive and attentive brown eyes. "You are much more than your body, Tyler. You always have been. I hope you're beginning to realize that." Those words touched Tyler in a way that no compliment about his weight loss had managed to. Julia saw him, really saw him, beyond the layers of fat that were dissipating, beyond the numbers on the scale, beyond the gym mirrors. In the weeks that followed, their lives began to intertwine beyond the walls of New Body Gym. Julia showed up at the design studio where Tyler worked, bringing healthy lunches for both. Tyler began to occasionally pick her up at the hospital after her shifts. To Tyler's surprise, Mrs. Evelyn and Julia got along instantly. During a dinner at his house, he watched in wonder as his mother, usually reserved, opened up to Julia, showing old photos and telling stories from when Tyler was a child. "He was always stubborn," Mrs. Evelyn said, showing a photo of Tyler at 10 years old, already overweight, but with a radiant smile as he held a drawing contest trophy. When he set his mind on something, no one could convince him otherwise. "That stubbornness seems to be serving him well now," Julia commented, her eyes meeting Tyler's across the table, her silent communication that made his heart race. It was on a Sunday afternoon during a hike in the Pineville National Park that something definitely changed between them. The day was perfect, the sky an intense blue that you only see in the deep mountains. Tyler, who before would have been reluctant to go on a trail, now walked confidently, breathing deeply the pure forest air. They stopped to rest in a clearing that offered a spectacular view of the city below. Sitting side by side on a fallen log, the silence between them was comfortable, full of possibilities. "You know what I admire most about you?" Julia suddenly asked. "My newly discovered muscles," Tyler joked, theatrically flexing his arm. Julia laughed, but soon her countenance became serious again. "Your resilience. You could have given up so many times, with Garrett underestimating you, with Matthew and his friends mocking, with the stares, the comments." She paused, but you continued. "Not for them, but for you." Tyler felt something warm grow in his chest. "It wasn't just for me," he admitted. "At first, maybe, but afterwards there was you." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning. Julia turned slightly to face him, her eyes seeking his with an intensity that made Tyler momentarily forget how to breathe. "Me?" Her voice was almost a whisper. "You were the only person in that gym who looked at me as a human being from the first day. Not as a project, not as an anomaly, but as a person. Tyler took a deep breath. And the more I got to know you, the more I wanted to be worthy of that look. The silence that followed was interrupted only by the distant song of birds and the soft rustling of leaves in the mountain breeze. When Julia finally spoke, her voice was loaded with emotion. I've been transforming too, Tyler. Before you, I was stagnant, immersed in work, using the gym just as a form of control, of keeping everything in order. She smiled, a light and trembling smile. You reminded me what it's like to feel, what it's like to truly care about someone. Tyler couldn't tell who moved first. He only knew that, the next moment, his lips found Julia's in a soft kiss, hesitant at first, then deep and full of unspoken promises. When they separated, both were breathless, not from the physical effort of the hike, but from the intensity of that moment. That was, Tyler began, not knowing how to complete. Perfect, Julia concluded, her smile now confident and radiant. The sun was beginning to set when they returned to the city, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating in a new, shared rhythm. The next morning, Tyler entered the gym as a different man, not just because of the transforming body, but because of the confidence that radiated from him. For the first time, he didn't care about the looks or comments. His mind was full of Julia, of the taste of her lips, the warmth of her hands, the promise of a new beginning. He was so absorbed in his thoughts that he almost didn't notice Matthew approaching. The young man who for months had been a constant source of jokes and humiliation now seemed almost embarrassed. Hey, Tyler, he called, his voice less arrogant than usual. Can I talk to you for a minute? Tyler stopped, surprised not just by the approach, but by the use of his name. For Matthew, he had always been the fat guy, never a person with his own identity. Sure, he replied cautiously. Matthew hesitated, visibly uncomfortable. I wanted to apologize. For the way I treated you when you arrived, it was stupid of me. The sincerity in the apology caught Tyler by surprise. It was the last thing he expected from the one who represented everything he feared in that environment. Why now? Tyler asked, genuinely curious. Matthew looked away momentarily. My younger sister recently started college. She gained quite a bit of weight in the first semester, and now she's going through the same thing you did. People treat her the way I treated you. He sighed. Seeing her suffer made me realize how cruel I was, and seeing how you continued despite everything, that taught me something. Tyler nodded slowly. There was no anger in his heart, just an understanding that came from hard-earned maturity. Thank you for the honesty. He extended his hand. No hard feelings. Matthew accepted the handshake with visible relief. In that small gesture of reconciliation, a chapter in Tyler's journey ended. It was no longer about proving something to people like Matthew. It was about discovering who he was beyond the mirrors, beyond the stares of others, beyond the limitations he had imposed on himself for so long. Later that day, when Julia entered the gym, her eyes immediately found Tyler's. The smile they exchanged contained the entire universe of possibilities that now opened up for both. A silent promise that, together, they would continue transforming, discovering new horizons, new challenges, new loves. The real challenge was yet to come. A test that would not be of physical strength, but of emotional strength, putting to the test everything Tyler had learned about himself in those months of transformation. A trial that would reveal the true nature of his journey and the secret that Julia guarded in her heart. The invitation arrived by email on a Thursday morning. New Body Gym is pleased to announce its first transformation challenge, Tyler read. The words with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The event would consist of a competition among the students who had progressed the most in the last 6 months, with various tests of endurance, strength, and overcoming. You're going to participate, aren't you? Asked Ryan, his boss, who was passing by his desk at the moment Tyler was reading the email. 6 months ago, Ryan had been one of the many who doubted his persistence. Now there was genuine interest and support in his voice. I don't know, it seems very exposing, Tyler replied, uncertain. Man, you've lost almost 55 pounds. You're practically the story of overcoming they're looking for. Ryan leaned on the divider of the workstation. Besides, it would be great publicity for the studio. Designer from Creative Design wins Physical Transformation Award. Imagine the marketing. Tyler smiled, shaking his head. Typical of Ryan to think of publicity first, but he wasn't completely wrong. There was something attractive about the idea of showing his transformation, not out of vanity, but as proof that change was possible, that the bets against him were wrong. That night, during dinner in the small house he now shared with Julia, a step they had taken after 3 months of dating, he mentioned the challenge. Garrett talked about that today, Julia commented, serving herself a generous portion of the salad that Tyler had prepared. He's convinced you'll be the big highlight. Funny how he changed his tune. Remember how he doubted I'd come back after the first day? Julia smiled, that smile that still made Tyler's heart skip a beat. People like Garrett only respect results. She extended her hand across the table, intertwining her fingers with his. But don't do it for him, or for Ryan, or for anyone, only if it's something you really want. Tyler reflected on her words as they finished dinner. What did he really want? 6 months ago, his only goal was to feel less uncomfortable in his own body. Now, he had achieved that, and much more. Not just physically, but in all aspects of his life. He had more confidence at work, a healthy, loving relationship. Even his relationship with Mrs. Evelyn, who now lived alone but had dinner with them every Friday, had improved. I'll participate. He finally decided as they washed the dishes side by side, not to win but to mark an endpoint to this phase, to celebrate where I've reached and look to the future. Julia hugged him from behind, resting her head on his back, now broader and more defined. I'm proud of you. I always will be. In the weeks that followed, Tyler intensified his workouts. Garrett, glimpsing the possibility of having his project awarded, created a special preparation program. The challenge was rapidly approaching, and with it grew the expectation at the gym. It was during one of these intensified workouts that Tyler noticed something different about Julia. Normally energetic and focused, she seemed distant, almost lethargic. Her movements, always precise, were hesitant. At one point he saw her lean against a machine, breathing deeply, as if trying to catch her breath. Are you okay? Tyler asked, approaching her with concern. Just tired, she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Double shift yesterday at the hospital. Tyler accepted the explanation, but in the days that followed, he realized something wasn't right. Julia, always an early riser, now had difficulty getting out of bed. Her skin, once radiant, seemed paler, and there were moments when she simply seemed absent, as if she were fighting against something he couldn't see. You need to see a doctor, he finally said, one night when he found her on the couch, wrapped in a blanket despite the heat of the summer night. I already did, she answered, surprising him. It's just anemia. I'm taking iron supplements. But there was something in her eyes that said it wasn't just that. Tyler knew Julia well enough to know when she was hiding something. The day of the challenge arrived. On a sunny Saturday, New Body Gym had been transformed. Equipment had been reorganized to open space in the center of the hall, where a small arena had been set up. Promotional banners covered the walls, and a judges' table, composed of Garrett and 2 other renowned personal trainers from the city, was strategically positioned. Tyler arrived early, with Julia by his side. She seemed better that morning, with a little more color in her cheeks and her usual smile back on her lips. Remember our agreement? She asked, adjusting the support t-shirt she had specially made for the event. Team Tyler was written in large letters on the back. No matter. The result we'll celebrate, Tyler replied, leaning in to kiss her softly. The competition began with a presentation of the 6 finalists, all with impressive transformation stories. There was Marissa, a mother of 3 who lost 65 pounds after her last pregnancy. Richard, a former athlete who recovered from a serious accident. Paul, a teenager who overcame school bullying through weightlifting. And the twins Fiona and Frederick, who decided to change their lives together after health problems in the family. And then there was Tyler, the designer who entered the gym under laughter and bets, and now was there, 55 pounds lighter, infinitely stronger, with a confidence he had never imagined possible. The trials began. First, a cardiovascular endurance test on the treadmill. Tyler wasn't the fastest, but he maintained a steady pace that put him in third place. Next came a strength circuit, where he did surprisingly well, finishing second. Between the trials, his eyes always sought Julia in the audience. She was there, applauding, shouting his name, her face illuminated with pride. But then, during the third trial, a weightlifting challenge, something happened. Tyler was positioned, ready for his turn, when a commotion in the audience caught his attention. Julia had fallen. People were gathering around her, concerned voices overlapping. Without thinking twice, Tyler abandoned his position and ran toward her, pushing people to get through. When he arrived, Julia was already sitting, visibly embarrassed, a glass of water in her hands. "I'm fine," she murmured, avoiding his eyes. "It was just a dizzy spell. Please, go back to the competition." "Forget the competition. We're going to the hospital now." "No!" The vehemence in her voice surprised them both. More softly, she added, "Please, Tyler, you've worked so hard for this moment. Don't give up because of me." Reluctantly, he agreed, but his heart was no longer in the competition. He completed the rest of the trials mechanically, his mind divided between what was happening in the arena and Julia, who insisted on remaining in the audience, despite her pallor. When the final results were announced, Tyler had won second place. Overall, 6 months ago this would have been an impossible dream. Now it seemed almost irrelevant given his concern for Julia. After the award ceremony, quick and full of applause, flashes and congratulations, Tyler finally managed to take Julia home. On the way, she remained silent, leaning against the passenger seat, her eyes closed. "It's not just anemia, is it?" he asked softly when they stopped at a red light, a few blocks from home. Julia opened her eyes slowly, and Tyler saw in them a mixture of fear and resignation that made his heart freeze. "No," she finally replied, her voice almost a whisper. "It's not just anemia." That night, sitting on the small balcony of their shared apartment, with the view of the illuminated city below them, Julia finally told the truth. 2 months ago, during a routine checkup, they had found something in her blood tests. More tests confirmed acute myeloid leukemia, an aggressive type of blood cancer. "The doctors are optimistic," she said, her hands firmly holding Tyler's, as if afraid he might disappear. "I'll start chemotherapy next week. The chances are good, especially because we discovered it relatively early." "Why didn't you tell me before?" Tyler's voice was choked, a mixture of fear, sadness, and a pang of betrayal. Julia sighed, her eyes fixed on the city lights below. "You were so focused on the challenge, so happy with your transformation. I didn't want that to be overshadowed by my illness." She turned to face him. "And maybe, selfishly, I also wanted to preserve a little more of our normal life before everything changed." Tyler pulled her into his arms, feeling her fragile body against his. How many times had she supported him when he felt weak? How many times had she been his rock when everything seemed to be falling apart? "We'll face this together," he promised, his voice firm despite the tears that threatened to fall. "Just as you were by my side during my transformation, I'll be by your side during the treatment. You are not alone in this." In the months that followed, the lives of both changed drastically. The gym, once so central to Tyler's routine, became secondary. Now his days were divided between work, which Ryan kindly allowed him to do remotely whenever necessary, and accompanying Julia to her chemotherapy sessions. Seeing the woman he loved go through that process was the most difficult test Tyler had ever faced. Julia, always so strong and independent, now struggled against extreme fatigue, constant nausea, and the gradual loss of her beautiful brown hair. But even in her weakest moments, she maintained a dignity and courage that Tyler found almost superhuman. And in the rare moments when she gave in to despair, it was he who held her, promising that better days would come. Curiously, it was during this challenging period that Tyler discovered an inner strength he didn't know he possessed. Not the physical strength he had developed at the gym, but something much deeper and more significant. The ability to remain firm in the face of adversity, to offer comfort even when his own heart was broken, to find small joys amid the storm. Support came from unexpected places. Mrs. Evelyn appeared regularly with home-cooked meals, adapted to Julia's taste altered by chemotherapy. Ryan reorganized projects so that Tyler could maintain his income without the pressure of impossible deadlines. And surprisingly, Garrett and several regulars from New Body Gym organized a blood donation campaign in Julia's name. 6 months after the diagnosis, the first good news came. The treatment was working better than expected. The cancer cells were in regression. There was still a long road ahead, but a light of hope finally shone at the end of the tunnel. It was on a quiet autumn afternoon, while Julia rested after a chemotherapy session, that Tyler had an epiphany. Sitting beside her, observing her serene face in sleep, he understood that his entire journey of physical transformation had been just a preparation for this moment. To be strong enough, not physically but emotionally, to stand firm when life tested his love in the cruelest way possible. That same night when Julia woke up, she found Tyler beside her holding a small velvet box. "What's that?" she asked, her voice still hoarse from sleep. "A promise," Tyler replied, opening the box to reveal a delicate white gold ring with a single aquamarine stone. "That I'll be by your side not only during this battle, but in all the battles to come, in all the victories, in all the defeats, in all the ordinary moments in between." Tears formed in Julia's eyes as she extended her hand, allowing Tyler to slide the ring onto her finger. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice breaking. "My future is still uncertain." "Everyone's future is uncertain," Tyler replied, holding her hands between his. "The only certainty I want is to have you by my side, whatever the path may be." 3. Months later, in a small ceremony in the garden of Pineville State Hospital, where Julia had just received the news that she was officially in remission, they exchanged vows before a small group of family and friends. Mrs. Evelyn cried openly, her pride in her son overflowing in every tear. Lucas, Julia's brother, came from Austin especially for the occasion, his smile identical to his sister's lighting up his young face. On the first anniversary of that fateful day when Tyler nervously entered New Body Gym, he and Julia returned together. Not to train, but for a special event that Garrett had organized. A workshop for people who, like Tyler in the past, felt intimidated by the gym environment. Before an attentive audience, Tyler shared his story. Not just the physical transformation, although that was visible to everyone, but the emotional journey. How he had learned that true strength comes not from muscles, but from the heart. How he had discovered that the body is just a vehicle for the soul, and that taking care of it is important not for aesthetic reasons, but because it allows us to live fully and be present for those we love. And as he spoke, his eyes always returned to Julia, seated in the front row. Her hair was beginning to grow back, forming short curls around her face. Her body, still fragile after the treatment, was slowly regaining its strength. But her eyes, those same eyes that had noticed Tyler when no one else saw him, shone with the same intensity as always, full of love, pride, and promises of a shared future. At the end of his talk, Tyler looked directly at the camera that was broadcasting the event to the gym's online channel and said the words he knew would resonate with many. The true transformation doesn't happen from the outside in, but from the inside out. It's not just about losing weight or gaining muscle. It's about discovering who you really are, under all the layers of fear, insecurity, and others' expectations. It's about finding the strength to face not just a difficult workout, but the real challenges that life puts in our path. The applause that followed was warm, but for Tyler the only sound that mattered was Julia's voice whispering, "I love you," as their hands found each other once again at the beginning of another chapter of their shared journey. Dear listeners, we hope that Tyler and Julia's story has touched your hearts. To continue this journey of transformation and overcoming, we've prepared a special playlist with equally moving stories. Find it here by clicking on the link to the left. If this narrative resonated with you, Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life, love, and overcoming. Don't miss our upcoming content. Share this with others who might be inspired by this transformative journey of body and soul.